Notre Dame with the number 4 class in the 2022 247 list here. And we are 3 weeks away from National Signing, 2 weeks away on Wednesday from early National Signing Day, when about 85 to 90% of the players will be signed. That's crazy good.
Yeah. I can almost guarantee you that's going to change a little bit.
Sure. But that's what Brian Kelly's leaving.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where I brought up the point earlier where, like, I think that's where Notre Dame fans are a little bit more, like why they're shaking their head a little bit about it. It's not the fact that he left for an LSU style job. I mean, I can understand the money. I can understand the idea of having some lesser academic hurdles. I can understand the idea that LSU maybe has a better chance of winning a national championship like they've shown in recent years. What I don't understand is right before a college football playoff berth, you have your best recruiting class since like 2013 when they brought in Jalen Smith, just to give you an idea of who the top recruit was in that class. You just hired maybe the best defensive coordinator in college football, probably along with Dan Lanning at Georgia, and a guy that probably would have stayed with you for a few years. So that's the kind of stuff that seems odd. Seems a little bit more odd to me. But again, like I said, I can't blame him for leaving for money and some of the other things that he possibly left for.
Yeah. Well, I was saying this whenever my internet connection betrayed me more than Brian Kelly betrayed Notre Dame. I was in the middle of saying, I think what makes that, to piggyback off of what you're saying, Brian Kelly said all year the term transitional year, which did not imply that he had any idea that he was going to leave after the end of this year. Transitional year means, we're building this to get what we want to get in the next couple of years. I mean, just the fact that he used that terminology, I think, when you kind of take a step back and look at it from a big picture standpoint, that's what makes it hurt, because, you were starting to fantasize about what Notre Dame could look like when they bring in a guy like, and now I'm going to talk recruiting a little bit, like a CJ Williams, who I can't say is going to stay at Notre Dame now, because, Lincoln Riley just went to USC, who's in CJ Williams's backyard, and now Notre Dame lost their coach. I mean, it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to keep some of those guys, and that's the part about losing Brian Kelly that hurts the most to me. I don't know. I don't know. And so, Nathan was kind of mentioning, that, and I wholeheartedly agree, keep Marcus Freeman. You got a chance maybe to talk one of those guys into staying at Notre Dame, because, Marcus Freeman did really well recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's pretty well understood that he's branched out a little bit. I mean, I know he's the defensive coordinator, but as he's had his hand in the recruiting of some of the other players as well, maybe that aren't even necessarily defensive guys. Keep that class together as best you can. And I don't necessarily think that you're looking at a Notre Dame class that is going to take a big, huge hit talent. I think they can survive it at the very least. So I don't know. I mean, man, it's on one hand, I'm hopeful for the next step of Notre Dame football, because, maybe this will end up being a blessing in disguise. I mean, I'm not a Brian Kelly hater by any means, but maybe just new blood or new ideas, or, ideas that get elevated, or however you want to put it. Maybe that's good for the program, but it does hurt in a lot of ways. So I'm definitely in a very bittersweet type of a feeling right now.
And I know there's some people that are saying that Kelly won't be able to handle the LSU fans. I don't think they've been on some Notre Dame message boards, because Notre Dame message boards can get pretty hectic at times.
Different type
I
of
was
insult.
searching all over I was searching all over the place for Brian Kelly's salary. So since he was coaching at a private school, does anyone have a good handle on what he was making?
What was the announcement for his LSU? Just it was like 7 years, $100 million, right, or something like that.
10 years.
10 years, $100 million. Okay, so only 10 million, which I think most people thought he was going to end up getting more, possibly. I can tell you, with pretty good accord that Brian Kelly was probably around 5 or 6 at Notre Dame.
Really?
Yeah, there were the way that they use their money for head coaches, it doesn't always show. So like while his salary probably showed, like, I think someone told me today his salary showed like somewhere around like 2.75 million. There were other ways from like foundations and stuff like that he was making you know, more than that, and probably double what it shows on his resume or whatever.
But I was a bit surprised because I thought that was a bit low. There are maybe 5 to 10 coaches that were in that at least 7 to 7.5 million range, and most of them had not accomplished what Brian Kelly has.
Yeah, and I would say I'm saying it's at least 5 or 6. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 7 or 8 because of it. But there are people out there that think he's only making 3 mil, which is not correct. And I should preface that by saying 3 million is a lot of money, so we probably shouldn't complain too much about that overall.
Well, Notre Dame, they released their financials, and what is it, like 3 years in arrears, where you kind of get an idea of, you know, what coaches like Brian Kelly are making. So like 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was, you know, around that 2.75, and he's probably gotten, you know, a raise or two. And Under Armour certainly pays him quite a bit to, you know, wear their apparel and that type of stuff. They find other ways, like Nathan was saying, to compensate, even though it's not Notre Dame necessarily paying the coach. So who knows? I mean, I feel like there's a very wide range of what he could have been making, and no one knows for absolutely sure.